So what are we going to talk about today then?
I haven't got a clue, mate.
What would you like to talk about is swearing.
Swearing, right? Okay.
Swearing. Yeah, we should talk about swearing because, you know, watching a lot of commentators on YouTube, and you know, some swear, some don't.
Yeah.
You know, look, we're recording this now, so you know, I've already got into like presenter mode, and
yeah,
I don't really swear when I'm in. Well, rather than say presenter mode, let's say professional mode, right?
Professional mode, yeah. That's
yeah. But I don't really swear much in my private, you know, in like, you know, personal life. And anyway, I'm not a big swearer. Never have been really. It's not because I'm uncomfortable with it. And I think there are times, and look, you know, there's times when we've spoken and it comes out, right?
Yeah.
But it's, you know, and maybe, you know, as our chats start off with WTF, you know, it's like, you know, maybe we should address this issue of swearing because there is a place for it, I think.
I think so. As you know, I'm a big swearer. I do love swearing.
Does that mean like you're 6'9" and you swear, i.e. you're a big swearer, or like you swear a lot?
That could be, yeah, so that could be interpreted both ways. I swear a lot and I'm a big swearer because I'm 6'9". So yeah, I do swear quite a bit. And yeah, I do like a good swear word. There's some words that I don't use. I only use my swearing probably, you know, rotates around 2 or 3 words, and that's it. I'm not so I'm a big swearer, not an extreme swearer. If that makes sense. I think there's a difference.
Right. You don't swear when you're doing your extreme ironing on the side of a mountain, then, no?
No, I don't do any of that. No.
Right.
No, it's interesting you picked iron in there as well. You obviously know me very well. But yeah, I am partial to swearing, and it is a bit of a running joke at home, you know. I
think it's interesting because, yeah, it's definitely part of normal conversation. I think, you know, very rarely do you have like if you're down the pub with friends, you know, and it can be male or female, you know, they're swearing, and
yeah.
You know, I've known women who are worse, you know, like swear like troopers worse than some of the guys. So it's like, it's not a male female thing either.
No, it's not. No.
But one of the things that I thought was interesting a while back, you know, the comedian Frank Skinner.
Yeah.
He used to be like every other word in one of his shows.
Yeah.
Swear word.
What, his stand-up stuff or his presenting stuff? Yeah.
His live stuff. And like, it really blew. I mean, that was his thing was, or part of his thing was to try and shock people. Yeah. And part of the way he did that was through this extreme use of language.
Yeah.
But then he like had this epiphany moment and he completely flipped. And it wasn't just language though. He did that in a lot of aspects of his life. I think he became religious. He stopped drinking. There was a lot, I think.
Maybe
he had a road to. Yeah, sorry.
He had a lot going on, didn't he, in his heyday?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. And then he's completely flipped now. And I was listening to him a while ago.
Is that why we don't hear of him anymore? I'm joking.
Well, you know,
I'm just kidding.
There may be something to that. Maybe people like a good. Well, there's always been a place for a good blue comedian, hasn't there? I mean, you know, you go back in history.
Yeah, I've never really subscribed to that, actually. I like sort of more intellectual comedians, but I'm not saying Frank Skinner's not intellectual, because I know he is.
Yeah.
But I think that can disguise intellect sometimes if you overdo it. I mean, you know, when I say I'm a big swearer, I'm not every other word.
No.
But I'm not afraid to swear, let's just put it that way. Yeah, but I know there's some link, isn't there, around swearing to intellect, and actually people who swear more are meant to be more intellectual.
Yes, I've seen that as well. I don't know where that connection comes from. I think it's
probably come from an obsessive swearer who's just circulated that.
Yeah.
I'd imagine anyway.
I mean, for me, there's definitely, well, look, we've had conversations, you know, where we're like, let's say the intensity is built up, and then suddenly, you know, I'll say something, you know, and it'll be you know, well, let's say it. I mean, maybe the fuck word or something like that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not a word I use naturally,
No.
and like a lot, but it's like there can be a moment when the emotion builds up, or the sense of wanting to emphasize builds up, and there's like no other way of really expressing how you feel. And I think
Yeah.
if you don't use it a lot and then you use it,
Oh yeah, it's a bit of a mic drop moment, isn't it? In that
yeah,
sense, you know, it stops people in their tracks.
yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's why people don't listen to me then. Maybe.
Yeah.
Need to have a think about that.
Food for thought.
I need to look up Frank Skinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always amazed. I don't know if you've seen any of, you know, some people put like little clips of their kids up on YouTube as like cute moments, you know.
What, where they swear?
And then you see them and it's like they're swearing like troopers at the age of 2. It's like some of the first words they've learned are those words. And it's like, why are you proud of that? I mean, it's like, why are you putting that up as if it's cute to hear your son or daughter using that language? Why do you think that's a good thing to put out there?
I've never understood that. I you know, because obviously I got a 9-year-old and he doesn't swear, and we've got kind of almost like, do you remember Sorry with was it Ronnie Corbett?
Yeah,
the TV show, and his dad always used to say language, Timothy, you know, and Harry kind of plays that role in the house almost at 9, says language, daddy.
well, you do need to have a mature head in the house, you know. I mean, let's face it.
You know, and it's good, it's always good to rely on a 9-year-old for that when you're 46, but my view on that in terms of swearing, you know, in front of him, not when he was really young, but when he's got to an age and he hears it, is not to shelter him from it, because it goes on. I mean, I've heard his school, you know, playground, and it's
of course
shocking.
Yeah.
But I just think the more you shield people away from that, the more of their curiosity, you know, sort of dials itself up, and the more likely they are to then start using it. And I'm really proud of it, because he, you know, he'll leave games. You know, if he'll play online and someone's swearing in a game, he'll leave the game. He said, I don't want to play with them because they're swearing. And that might be someone who he goes to school with. He said, I don't want to play with them because they're swearing and I don't like it. Which is cool. But he did, I think he was about 5 maybe when he swore. I've only ever heard him swear once. And he was playing online, and it was just this whole, he was just starting to get to grips with the frustration of losing, if you like. And I remember it was kind of a mic drop moment for him, really, but it was very quiet, and he was playing some silly game, you know, online, and he obviously lost, and his response was, that blue guy fucking killed me. And I nearly fell off my chair, because as a parent you're kind of thinking, I really want to laugh at that, I can't, and I had to discipline him, obviously. And so disciplined him, you know, and he's never sworn since. And you know, he is that sort of counterbalance to me, I guess, in the house, where he says, language, daddy, you know, which I quite like. But I think that's because, I'd like to think that's because I've not shielded him from it. He knows it exists. I've told him that it's not good. Daddy does it sometimes. I didn't tell him, obviously, Daddy likes doing it, but I've tried to educate him around it, and whatever I've done, I seem to have got lucky with, and it's worked. So he's not, you know, he doesn't swear, and he reins me in when he needs to.
You know, I saw a video. This is, I don't know, good 6-7 months ago now, I think, and it was one of these cute videos, you know, a proud dad, and had recorded, and it was his daughter, and she was sitting what I can only presume was the naughty stare, you know, in their house. And literally all she was saying in like this really almost pathetic voice was, I'm sorry, daddy, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, daddy, I'm sorry, daddy. And this guy had recorded it and was like proud of it.
What?
And I'm thinking, what on earth have you done to that child that they think, you know, the appropriate way to behave is to be cowering on a step going, I'm sorry, daddy, I'm sorry. You know, it's like, how is that girl going to grow up in life? You know, I just, I was absolutely bemused, and it had millions of hits. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
millions of people liked it. Well, not millions of people. There was, you know, lots of people liked it, and I was bemused by the whole thing. I don't get it.
The whole idea of the naughty step, I think. I mean, I've never really used it with Harry, but it's when I said I disciplined him, I don't mean I did that, or you know, I always talk to him about stuff. I don't, you know, I'm not going to sort of lock him in a basement for a week or whatever, you know, just because it's sport. But I always think the whole concept of that naughty step, you know, the word naughty and the, you know, the baggage that carries or assigns to people creates exactly that kind of environment, that relationship with it. And you know, if I was ever gonna use it, I would call it like the reflection step, or the do you know what I mean? The self-reflection step.
Well, put something a bit more of a positive spin on it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really just to, you know, I get the whole idea of time out, but it's more around reflecting on why that wasn't acceptable or whatever it was, what you could do differently. You know, maybe what you could do differently step. It's probably not quite as catchy as the naughty step though.
Doesn't trip off the tongue, you know. It's like
it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It kind of trips up the stairs. But but I do think that, you know, a lot of the language we use with children creates exactly that dynamic.
Yeah.
And I never, you know, in terms of my swearing habit, shall we say, mine is more for comedic effect, if anything. It's not a like, thinking about it now, and I've never really sat there and analysed my swearing habits. I would never swear in an aggressive way, and I never do. It's normally for, you know, comedic effect, for fuck's sake, or you know, that,
or
that
for emphasis, maybe, like,
or or you know, shit. So I don't, you know, because you get people that are aggressive and intimidating with swearing and use it as a bullying tactic, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't ever use it that way,
No.
ever.
No, I think it's interesting because it's like, you know, sometimes I sense, you know, let's say if I'm working with a client or something, and like there's an intense subject, and they get to a point where they just don't know how to express themselves.
Yeah.
And you sort of get that sense that they really want to swear, you know?
Yeah.
But they don't feel they can because it's not professional. And I get that. I mean, if you know, I mean, that's how I started off this chat. It's like, you know, I'm going into professional mode, you know. And
you wouldn't say that. Yeah.
So there is definitely an air around, you know, is it professional? Is it not professional to swear? And is it aggressive behavior?
I think there's aspects around it being accepted as well, or you know, looking for acceptance. Like I can't imagine. So you know, the pressure maybe my son feels sometimes to swear to fit in and feel like he belongs. If he's with a social group that swear a lot, and I'm sure his group don't actually, because they're a good, you know, tight knitted group of good kids. But maybe every parent thinks that, who knows. But that pressure of saying it and being accepted by your peer group because you can, you know, talk the same language, or you know, and as you know, looking at sort of Harry's age as he's growing up, there's going to be a period where he thinks, actually, I'm old enough to do that now, and I should do it rather than I need to. I remember when I was about 18, 19, I took time out of education and worked in a factory for a few years because I pretty much had my head up my arse being a sort of an art student, and I was like a typical art student, didn't know what was going on in the world, and just felt actually I needed to ground myself. Obviously I was unsuccessful because I still got my head up my arse, but I worked with a guy. English wasn't his first language, and he was like a machine operator, and whenever there was a huddle of talking, you know, in tea breaks and things like that, he would swear, but he hadn't grasped where to put the swear word in his sentence. So he would always end a sentence with a swear word that was completely, it was really funny.
It must have been.
But it kind of highlighted that pressure he felt to actually put something in there. You know, I don't believe it, fucking. He would say things like that. and we would all laugh. But, you know, and I worked there for 3 years, and he always did it. He just, it was almost like it wasn't his natural
Yeah.
stance to do that, and so but he
Yeah.
felt like he had to fit in, I guess,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
accepted. So it's
Yeah.
quite interesting in terms of like social circles and how people perceive it, and the role it plays. It changes, doesn't it?
Well, it is, and I think it comes back to that point you were making earlier. It's like, you know, using language and how we learn to use language or don't. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been watching a lot of these Jordan Peterson videos lately, and yeah, okay, he's a controversial character, you know, and he's you know, I guess he's a bit Marmite. You either like him or hate him, depending on what your perspective on life is.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he says, which I really do like, is like, learn how to communicate, you know, learn how to write and learn how to speak. And there was a video I was watching of his, and he said, if you do those two things, you are literally unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I guess it's going a bit back to the idea that, you know, the pen is mightier than the sword. And
Yeah.
but actually, if you think about the way the world is going, it's like, what is left for human beings to do? Because most jobs are being automated in some way.
Yeah, or reduced, eliminated.
Yeah, and or the human element of it is down to data entry or something. So, you know, what's left is actually human relationships, how we talk with each other, how we foster those relationships, how we build trust, you know.
Yeah.
And that comes from our ability to communicate effectively.
Yeah, and it's more, you know, we're more reliant on that than ever, particularly with the current climate where people are working in silo or remotely far more. You know, you're relying on different modes of communication where you have to be able to express yourself clearly and be understood.
Yeah.
And sort of historically, things like, you know, text messages, emails, all that sort of stuff, they're a minefield for being misread, misinterpreted.
Oh, we've all had that, haven't we?
And yet we're kind of finding ourselves more reliant on those devices to communicate as a collective, as a society. And it's
absolutely.
You know, that's quite scary, really.
Well, I think I'm in danger of definitely sounding like one of those in my day, you know. But there is an argument there for like, you know, the way in which schools, I think you got to go back quite a long time, actually, maybe 50, you know, I'm going back probably even before I started at secondary school.
Yeah.
When there was a real discipline about learning how to write precisely, so that and speak precisely, so that what you wrote and what you spoke actually reflected what you meant.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what I come across today is people find it very, very difficult to articulate what they really mean.
Yeah, no, they do.
You know, and that's, I think that's one of the big things that gets in the way of, you know, well, you know, really good relationships for a start.
Yeah, probably more so in business as well, actually, because there is that added pressure then for the professionalism, you know, much like you said with the presenting, where you bring in, I don't know what's, you know, commonly called corporate speak, or, you know, and it kind of completely masks the point of, you know, and it's almost like just a game. It's just playing. Well,
I was talking to a friend last night on the phone, and she was saying how she's got a meeting with a woman in a couple of days' time, and this woman is like, she just speaks in jargon.
Yeah.
You know, and she said it's like incredibly difficult to actually understand what she means.
Yeah.
You know, because it's like, I've read a lot about jargon. I'm sure you have as well. But it's like, you know, people use jargon as an excluder. So it's like, if you don't understand what I'm saying, you're not part of my club.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
and I hate that.
Yeah, I do. Maybe that's why I swear a lot, actually, because I obviously grew up in a rough part of London, so maybe that's
well, why. I think there is a part of that. It's like, if you don't swear, you're not part of our club. You know, if that's the club.
Yeah. Quite possibly.
You know,
I think
if the club is swearing and you don't swear, you're not part of that club. That goes back to what you were saying earlier about like the feeling of the need to fit in, you know?
Maybe. I think there's a flip. The other side of that coin is as well is, you know, whoever you're with you need to make sure they can understand you. And so
Well, yeah.
you adapt your language. I mean, I'm not a compulsive swearer, you know, in terms of like I've not got no control over it or anything like that. But it's but you do. I think it's an adaptive thing, isn't it? Maybe that you bring in when you're interacting with certain people and then not others, because it's like a common language.
Yeah.
But I do think we're in danger of not, as you say, that precision of actually explaining what you mean. And I see that with my son with his school now, because obviously I'm a bit involved in the school.
Yeah.
And there is a heavy focus on hitting numbers.
Yeah.
And actually they're targeted on the amount of words they read and things like that. And of course, you know, I went to college with someone who was incredibly, see, again, this is the difference, isn't it? Around sort of things like nuances around like intellect. So this person had a very good memory, didn't necessarily understand everything that they were absorbing, but could remember it.
Right.
And so could express themselves in a very kind of intimidating way almost in terms of intellect. But if they were challenged, because they didn't have that opinion or they hadn't absorbed that information and processed it, they just remembered it, couldn't then debate and didn't then have points of view on things.
Yeah.
You know, I remember, you know, I can take, you know, I can teach a parrot to say pretty Polly, but it doesn't necessarily mean the parrot knows what it's saying. Do you know what I mean?
What it means, absolutely.
And there is this kind of approach that I'm seeing with teaching at the moment, where it's, well, let's talk about that story. What did that mean? You know, that you've just read, and they haven't got the time for that because they're too pressed on hitting numbers and getting through books, moving them up a ranking system. Yeah. And I think, you know, as a society, we that's kind of a worrying trait that we follow in lots of different areas, and we're not as, goes back to that reflective step, you know, sit on the self-reflection step and have a think about that story and what it meant to you, what you took away from it, what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it, not how many words did you read. So I do think
I like that. I think that's a great idea, actually.
But it you know, we don't reflect enough and process enough and formulate and attach our own opinions to things, and as a result, you know, we've got people that are robots. Well,
you do sort of think we're going that way, and then you've got this whole sort of, I'm going to use this word, I hate this word, right, but I'm going to use it. It's a four-letter word, right? It's a four-letter word. I'm going to use it in public. Meme.
Oh, okay. I'm so glad you pronounced that right.
Not Mimi.
None of people I've heard call it that and think that's not what it's called.
And it's like I don't know if I'm using it in the right context, to be honest, but it's like this meme that our attention span is getting shorter and shorter. So, you know, we've gone from having like long posts to shorter posts, and now TikTok is it TikTok?
TikTok, yeah.
Which is like, is it 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Sorry?
You've blown me away with your knowledge of like social, you know, vernacular.
Yeah, I'm blowing myself away as well.
There we go.
I think is it TikTok where you can only put up 30 seconds or maximum or something? It might even not be 30 seconds.
Something like that, yeah. I'm not.
And it's like, there's this idea that you have to pander to the idea. It's another idea. So you've got one idea pandering to another idea that we don't have time to pay attention. Yeah. So you've got these platforms being created which are deliberately there. It's like, okay, here's 10 seconds, here's 20 seconds of stuff, whatever that stuff might be. And it comes back to the principle that we've talked about before, which is like instant gratification. It's like,
absolutely. Yeah.
You know, and it's like you get a 10-second hit, a 20-second hit, it goes in, it hits your dopamine system, and you feel good. And that's how people get addicted to scrolling through these things. And I've done it myself, right? You know, we've had that thing like you wake up 3 o'clock and we can't get back to sleep. Okay, I'll just flick through
on TikTok.
And the next thing you know, an hour's gone by, you know, and
It's procrastination, isn't it? That's what it's create. It's encouraging and rewarding procrastination, because you're doing that. You're finding yourself pulled to that stuff almost inappropriately, because you need that hit, and you're not, you're not getting it from what you're doing, or which might be something that's important that you're meant to be doing. You think, I just need a bit of a distraction.
Yeah.
And like you say, 10 minutes turns into an hour.
Yeah.
And it's quite a slippery slope after that, because it then becomes part of your daily routine.
Well, and you are talking now the road to addiction, and it's sort of quite well documented that how much time people now waste on checking their Facebook or checking Twitter or checking, whatever it might be.
That's why I'm not on any social channels. I just don't, if I need to speak to someone, I'll speak to them.
So I tell you, I only did that twice, right? I did it twice. I've always been an early waker, right? Always. And I guess like most people, you've got a lot on your mind, maybe a bit stressed about stuff and, whatever. So, it's not uncommon for me to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, to be honest. And I remember the second time I did it, it was like, so I'd been on there for an hour, and it's like, oh my God, where did that hour go? It's like, now it's 4 o'clock in the morning. And I needed to get up to go for a pee. So, it's still dark.
Yeah.
But what I had, as I got out of bed and walked to the loo in the dark, was like there was like this flickering.
Yeah.
I don't know what they call it. There's probably a technical term for it. But in my vision, there was a light that was flickering.
Yeah.
And it's a concept. And I think it relates to the frame per second rate that the video appears on the screen.
Yeah.
And that absolutely scared the living daylights out of me, and I've not done it since.
Yeah. Because I'd imagine that you were probably looking at it in the dark as well.
I was,
which doesn't help. So it's there are other connotations, I guess, or other consequences of doing that. And it's it is quite a tricky thing, and also then it gets your brain active. You're coming back to sleep anyway, because your brain's then trying to process whatever it is you're taking in. I imagine you're not probably sitting there looking at like TikToks.
Well, to be honest, it did actually, because what it did for me was, I wake up because I sleep, and I get to sleep like really quickly. I don't have a problem getting to sleep. I go into a deep sleep, and then because I've got stuff going on in my brain, I wake up and my brain is going helter skelter.
Yeah.
And those couple of times I did do that, and watch those short video clips, I did actually get back to sleep quite quickly, because it's it had broken
that cycle
I was thinking about. And I got back into a relaxed state, so I could get back to sleep. So that actually didn't happen with me.
Mine's constantly helter skelter, so it doesn't.
But again, you see, I think it feeds back nicely to what we were saying about communication, because if it takes time to think about what it is you want to say and how you want to say it, so that what you say reflects what you really think and what you really mean. Well, to do that, you've got to stop and think. What do I really think? And that goes back to your point about reading. What do I think about this? And of course, people don't want to do that, so they get, and this becomes a circular thing. So they then get pulled into these videos where you've got people, I guess, a bit like what we're doing now, going, actually, this is what this means, and you don't have to put the effort in.
But if you think about the way sort of modern technology works as well, in terms of the things that we're using to communicate more heavily now than perhaps we were before, they have a built-in system that increases that pressure. You've got, like, if you're using WhatsApp, you've got 2 ticks. It's delivered. They haven't read it. They're blue now. They've read it. So why haven't they responded? They read that an hour ago. So why haven't they responded? And everyone's running around with that kind of pressure. And you think, well, I've got to respond because they know that I've read this. So I've got to deal with it. And it does increase that pressure to avoid processing or shorten the processing process.
No, that's really interesting. You've just triggered something. I hadn't thought about this for a long time. When I first moved down to London after uni with my mate Andy, we were looking for a place to live,
Mm.
And we were looking around the Kew Richmond area. That was at a time when normal people could afford to live there, by the way. That's how long ago it was. We were in this like a rental office, and we were chatting to the woman about a couple of properties, and the phone goes. So she stops talking to us and starts on this conversation with the phone. And I remember thinking then, and this was way before the days of mobile phones, way before them, right? I remember thinking then, why is that phone call more important than us, who we're sitting in front of you?
Yeah, exactly.
And I could tell from what she was talking about, it was just a new inquiry. It wasn't like it was a piece of business that if she didn't take that phone call right there and then, she'd lose it. It's like, and I thought, at an intellectual level, I was thinking, this is really interesting. At an emotional level, I was really pissed off. It's like, so that person is more important to you, and I'm sitting in front of you,
Yeah.
And I think you get a huge amount of that going on today because of what you were talking about. It's like the pull to the phone.
Yeah. And it's the increased pressure, isn't it? I read earlier, you've got a bunch of businesses now that are sort of piloting 4-day weeks, with full-time pay, and there's a worry about the pressure that that's going to create. But I think we're losing our ability to be authentic and be human and interact in a human way. I remember, because I've always been interested in like things like values and what people stand for and what businesses stand for. And I remember like years ago, I went to a client, went to visit their new office, and this is a big multinational business, big business. I won't name them or embarrass them, but it was the whole way that that whole experience. There were lots of moments of kind of truth, if you like, around what they really were like versus what they said they were like, publicly. And it was quite interesting. I remember turning up and there was no one. I buzzed the door. It was an intercom system. Buzzed the door. No answer. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay. So I thought, right, I'll call my contact.
Yeah.
Just as I did that, a delivery guy came out, let me in. So I just thought, oh, I'll just go in and walk up. Walked up. It was an unmanned reception. Stood there.
Yeah.
So a bank of desks, people working. They saw me, didn't know what to do with me. So they just kept their heads down and ignored me.
Yeah.
And I was in their reception. I had to call my contact on his mobile and say, I'm in your reception.
Yeah.
And he came out, and everywhere around the office was plastered, things around their values and this idea, people first and authenticity and communication, all this sort of, jargon, which they didn't really understand. It was just, we need to have that on there because it's expected.
Yeah.
Perhaps they should have had fucking ignorant on there or something like that, or that would probably been more honest. But I called the guy, he came out. I needed to use the bathroom because it took me an hour or so to get to him.
Yeah.
Went to the bathroom, one bathroom. There's a guy in there having a conversation with a customer on the phone while he's taking a pee.
I hate that.
Amazing.
I've seen that.
So I'm outside the toilet thinking, right, great. Anyway, so he comes out, I go in, I come out, I go into the meeting room, which is completely glass, very swish. I don't drink hot drinks typically. So they said, you want a water? And I said, yep, that's fine. I was with a couple of other people at the time who had hot drinks. So we went out, got everyone's drinks except for mine. Came back, got the hot drinks, and I just sat there and I looked at him and he went, I've forgotten your drink, haven't I? And I went, yeah. I said, but it's not a problem. He went, no, I'll just go and get it. He went into the kitchen. I could see the kitchen from where I was sat. I saw him go to the sink, and then he got talking to someone in the kitchen. And this is a senior guy in the business. He came back in the room, forgotten why he'd gone to get that water, and sat down and took it himself. I just had it next to his own coffee and sat there. And all the while I'm looking around thinking, right, none of these values are true. Anyway, we finished the meeting and he said, oh, let me introduce you to our MD. And it was the guy taking a piss in the toilet, talking to a customer. That was their MD. And you just think, wow, that was the icing on the cake.
Wow.
Because it, obviously he's setting the culture there, isn't he? or contributing to it massively. But it's this whole idea of, they felt obliged to say, we do all these wonderful things to people, and we're great communicators, and we're authentic and trustworthy and all that stuff. And it was,
well, that's when words are meaningless, isn't it? I mean, that literally is when words are meaningless.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just and it goes back to that pressure you have when you're communicating with words to be something that you probably aren't.
Yeah.
I'd much rather know what I was walking into than not.
Yeah, and there's something else around that as well that I've noticed with my kids. So my 25, 28 now, 26, 28 now. I know they've always thought that I was a bit too much, when it comes to expressing myself.
Right.
Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And that it's sort of in a way caused them to go the other way. You know how often you do, it's like, I don't want to be like my dad, or I don't want to be like my mum. You go the other way, right?
There's always a middle ground, but they never find it. They get polar opposite.
Yeah. And it's like you do have to sort of zigzag a bit before you find your own way.
Yeah.
But it's like my dad was really quite verbally aggressive, not physically aggressive, but verbally aggressive. And it goes back to what you were saying a little while ago, about, I can't remember exactly what but you said something that made me think, oh yeah, that's my dad. And he was, it's like the ability to be good with words, and be, and my dad was like that. He was deadly with words. He could cut you in half with his words.
Yeah.
And I always remember mum would go tongue-tied. So dad would say something, and instead of like being able to reply to him, she would lose the ability to talk.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was a big part of my experience of growing up and around words. But part of dad's thing, if he didn't like anything, he would always complain.
Yeah.
So, and we go into a restaurant, and I know the kids hated it, and I hated this, but it's like you could guarantee if we went out for lunch somewhere with the kids, something would be wrong. It actually became a bit of a running joke that whatever dad ordered, it wouldn't be right, or it wouldn't even be on the, it would be on the menu, but they wouldn't have it. There'd be something for him to complain about and get pissed off with, and he vocalized that. And at an early age, they really got uncomfortable with that, and they really, if you called a waiter over, and later, like if I called, if something happened, I remember one time we went to one of the pizza chains, and the pizza got was cold. It was like, no way, I'm not going to eat that, right?
Yeah.
Even though I like cold pizza from the fridge in the morning after a pint the night before, that's different, right?
Yeah.
But in this place, I was like, I'm not going to have a cold pizza, right? And I could see my kids literally cringing inside. Well, they weren't even cringing inside, they were cringing outside. It was like a physical thing, because they saw it as very confrontational and giving the waiter a hard time. And I don't think I was. It wasn't like I was blaming the waiter. I had to speak to somebody, and the waiter's like the go-between in a restaurant, The waiter is the go-between between the chef and you. And so there's been situations that the kids have been in that, where now that they're grown up, they're adult, they're living their own lives. And to be honest, sometimes I think they're putting up with stuff that I just wouldn't put up with. And they're eating it up. And I think there's two things. One, they still have this sort of sense of discomfort about speaking out and confronting the issue. But I think also there's another thing, which is like, there's what's the point? It's what's it going to resolve? Is it worth going through the hassle of having that conflict? Because what's going to come out of it? And I don't know, that leaves me feeling really mixed about the whole thing, because I think in the end, isn't that what communication is all about. It's about finding a way through these difficulties.
Yeah, because you know, I know you actually mentioned that in your email today, didn't you? Your email that went out, and it's around that trust piece.
Well, yeah.
And you can't actually build trust unless you can communicate authentically and precisely.
Yeah.
And that trust underpins everything, doesn't it? And so, you know, I don't know whether my tendency to swear helps people trust me or not. It's an interesting question, because it's you take me as you find me kind of thing.
Well, I guess it'll help some people trust you, and it'll make other people not trust you,
doesn't it? But but I was thinking about that, you know, that whole trust, and that relies on that open debate and, you know, ability to deal with that conflict, because you can't build it any other way.
No.
And we don't do that, and you know, and as a result, we tick boxes or do things that we think people want to hear and aren't really how it is, and we end up sort of role playing and, you know, just going back to the experience that I talked about with the MD, you know, taking a pee or whatever. I came out of there thinking, well, how do you trust that business?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nothing that they say is true.
Yeah.
And that's your takeaway.
Yeah, and that all happens subconsciously as well. It's like,
yeah, absolutely. I wasn't
sitting there
thinking that. It just, you know.
Yeah, it sort of comes to you as a thought afterwards, doesn't it? When everything comes together.
Yeah.
You know, I think you made a really interesting point there about how, you know, our ability to communicate is our ability to navigate through, you know, difficult situations and a sense of difference. And I can remember, I mean, I grew up through the troubles of Northern Ireland, you know, and it was huge. I mean, there's still huge divisions there, and I don't want to get into the subject of that, but I remember when it was first mooted that the way to get through this was to go into negotiations with the IRA, for the government to get into negotiations. And I think it was mediated by some senior Americans. I can't remember. It wasn't Henry Kissinger, I don't think, but it was someone akin to that. You know, heavyweight sense that they could facilitate a conversation. But there was outrage. I remember it clearly. There was outrage that, you know, the government and that anybody who was right-minded should consider talking to these people, you know, because of all the things they'd done.
Yeah.
But actually, it has proved to be a way through, not necessarily the way through, because obviously it's still not fully resolved. But I mean,
progress has been made.
Way resolved.
Yeah.
But it's only happened because of speaking. And you look at this in conflicts around the world now. It's like the conflicts that don't get resolved are the ones where the sides refuse to talk to each other.
Yeah. They're the ones that escalate.
And they do, because it's the only way through is to talk, and the only way is to be able to express what you really want.
Yeah.
And to hear what the other person really wants, or the other side really wants, and to navigate through the emotional reactions that causes, you know.
Yeah.
And then you see that play out in a much lesser sort of environment in our own relationships and in business and all that sort of stuff.
Everywhere, like, you know, as customers, as consumers, yeah,
and it's the ability to talk that gets you through that and to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
Which is why it then comes back to that Jordan Peterson thing, which is like, learn how to write, learn how to talk, you know, and you become unstoppable because you can engage in that process.
Yeah. So is this just been an elaborate sort of conversation to tell me to swear less?
No, because if I really wanted that, I would have been very direct with you. We'd have had a conversation about that in a very adult way.
Indeed. Not via email or WhatsApp. Or TikTok.
Definitely not by message.
There's no substitute, is there, for talking? That's the thing. And
well, absolutely.
And we need to make more time for that as a society, and not rely too much on the technology that makes it easier just to fire things across and hope for the best.
Yeah, now you're onto a whole nother thing about communicating at work, because it's like, how many people hide behind emails? I remember when emails first came in.
Yeah.
And I started to get emails. I had a glass office. So I was working at the Mirror, had a lovely glass office on the 20th, can't remember, 20th or 22nd floor, something like that, of Canary Wharf. And there'd be someone sitting 10 feet from me, separate. All that was separating was this glass office wall, right?
Yeah.
But they send me an email.
Yeah.
And I'd think, stick your head through the door, you know, and just talk, right?
Yeah.
And you know, you get that going on as well. So I think,
and that has different. There are different drivers behind that as well, because you get people hiding behind things, delaying and avoiding and all that. And then also you get things like arse covering, where it's like, I need this in writing because it can't just be a conversation, because if this gets called up later, I'm not going to be able to evidence that it took place. And and all of that boils down to trust.
It does, absolutely.
You know, and the only way you can build that is by talking and opening up and being honest and sharing as much as you know process. You've got to give part of yourself in that process, otherwise you're never going to be able to build those relationships.
No, that sort of feels like a good place to stop, actually.
No, I agree. Speak more,
swear less.
Well, we'll see. It's a work in progress.